Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing a review of a style of firearm I don't think I've ever reviewed on the channel thus far, and that is going to be a shotgun. This one specifically is the CZ712. Now, if you're familiar with the CZ lineup of shotguns, you know that this is not in its factory configuration. We'll be definitely going over that here shortly. But first I just want to talk about my experience with CZ as a whole, and just kind of let you know why I'm doing this video in the first place. So if you've seen some of the other videos I posted recently, I have a little bit now of experience with CZ handguns. I'm a huge fan of the firearms that I've owned from them in the past with the CZ-P01, CZ-P09. I've done videos for my employer on things like the CZ Scorpion and the CZ-527 line of bolt-action rifles. And all of my experience with CZ has been exceptionally positive. Now, to my knowledge, they don't know that I exist. They definitely had no affiliation with this video or any previous video, or very likely any future video. But based on my experience with a lot of their other firearms, I figured, well, their shotguns must be decent as well, but they're all really reasonably priced. Now, we'll go into price a little bit on later, but you can get these shotguns just in the base model for right around 500 bucks, which makes this, I think, in a very appealing entry for a lot of people into the semi-automatic shotgun realm, because that's about the price of a good pump action, at least in today's pricing. But I decided, you know what? I'm just morbidly curious enough in the quality of these CZ shotguns, especially being that they're not actually manufactured by CZ. They're actually made in Turkey by Huglu, who has a very good reputation with shotguns in general, but I figured CZ wouldn't slap their name on something that they didn't have a lot of faith in, so I decided I wanted to try one of these out, and then here we are. I also found that there wasn't a ton of content already on YouTube about these shotguns, and what little was out there was all fairly old, so I figured I would do my part, get some rounds through one of these things, and bring my thoughts to you. So we'll go ahead and dive into that, but first, let's go ahead and roll in some action shots of this thing actually in use, and we'll come back and talk about how this thing is currently set up. So as I alluded to in the beginning of this video, this thing is not in its factory configuration, but we'll go ahead and go through this shotgun, and I'll explain some of the changes that I've made, and in some cases how I did some of those. There may be some better options, but dang it, I'm a sucker for a hacksaw and a file, so I make things work. But let's go ahead and we'll work our way from the front to the back. So starting out up here at the muzzle end, this thing already comes threaded for chokes. If I remember correctly, this thing comes with 4 or 5 chokes. I'll put them on the side of the screen here. I have done the entirety of my testing with the improved cylinder choke. And I'm not gonna go ahead and thread this thing out, but put a little bit of choke lube on there, choke grease on there, and this thing has been working fine through the 400 or so rounds that I have through this, which we'll touch more on that later. The reason I went with the improved cylinder, I'll probably say this over and over through this video, I'm not a huge fan of shotguns. I don't care that much about shotguns. I definitely don't care to do any hunting with shotguns, at least as regulated under current guidelines. So because of that, I'm not trying to get any crazy tight patterning. To me, as a practical defensive shotgun or practical use shotgun, I care far more about reliability and the ability to just shoot whatever type of ammo I have through it. So whether I'm running slugs, buckshot, or birdshot, I wanted to not have to worry about changing my chokes. So I just went with the improved cylinder so I can run everything through it as I have so far, and everything has been working really well there. again, my shotgun vocabulary is very limited. There probably is some cross compatibility between these chokes and other chokes already on the market. But again, the fact that this comes with 4 or 5 and kind of the most popular ones really means you don't have to really go out and buy any others. But if you did want to, if you wanted to get some of the crazy like muzzle brake versions of them, there should be some options out there. I'll try to do some of the digging for that while I'm editing this, and again, put that on the side of the screen when appropriate. Now, this is a 20-inch version of the shotgun. Specifically, this is the utility model. So again, a 20-inch barrel. They do have hunting versions of this with a far longer barrel. Again, given that my primary use for the shotgun is not bird hunting, I wanted to go with a little bit of a shorter barrel length. Now, normally this thing comes with a 5-round magazine tube that has a little plug in there to get it to a hunting legal capacity of 2+1. It's a very easy plug to remove. You just screw off the factory end cap, and there's a little plug in the middle of the little blocker. You pull that out, thread that cap back on, and you're ready to shoot of a full 5+1 capacity. So it's a really simple modification, easy to go back and forth if you're using the same gun for home protection as well as for hunting. Again, in my case, I just pull the thing out straight away. However, you can also see that this is no longer the factory tube on here. I actually have a Wilson Combat +2 870 extension on here. The thread pitch for the Remington 870 on the magazine tube is actually the same as the CZ712, so these are cross-compatible. However, the length of the threading for the CZ shotguns is a lot longer, apparently, than the 870 shotguns. So I actually had to cut about 1/3 of an inch of that magazine tube off in order for when the extension is fully seated, for it to actually hold the handguard to where it wasn't wobbling. I'm sure there's a far more elegant solution to that. You can probably just have a gunsmith fabricate a little spacer or sleeve that you drop on and then tighten this down. Again, I just elected to go with a hacksaw and a file. I did see some forum posts about it from several years ago of people basically doing the same thing, so I already had a proof of concept there, so I went ahead and did it. Now, because I was reducing the amount of length to that magazine tube for those threads to engage onto, I wanted to add a little bit of extra support to that magazine tube in case this thing takes a direct impact. So I went ahead and put a Nordic Components barrel clamp on there. Now, the clamps are designed for the Nordic extensions, which there are Nordic extensions compatible with this one, but they're out of stock everywhere. So what I did is actually just took Gorilla Tape, wrapped it around the magazine tube just to get the full diameter correct, and then clamped it down. Again, it's mostly there just as a fail-safe, so I'm not terribly concerned about it in a practical standpoint of it, you know, clamping on there, but I just wanted it to be a little bit of a tighter fit. However, what that's also going to allow me to do, and I have one of these on back order, hence why it's not here for the video, is I'm going to be able to put a Picatinny rail here on the side of the clamp, which is then going to allow me to mount a flashlight of some sort up here on the front of the shotgun, and hopefully run a tape switch further back onto the forend here. So a lot of the changes that I've done are up in this area, and it's because I figure if I'm running a 20-inch barrel and I'm not worried about hunting considerations or hunting capacity limits, if I have that extra barrel length, why not get the magazine length to accommodate the same size? Otherwise, I'm just running a lot of excessive barrel length for the capacity. When we're talking about tube-fed magazines, we need all that length to get extra capacity. And again, if I'm running a 20-inch barrel, might as well extend that capacity. I get why CZ doesn't do it from the factory, at least anymore. We may touch on that later. But again, it's not something you can't fix. That also gave me an opportunity to attach a sling. So I have a blue 4-Skier Vickers sling on here. I would have preferred a padded sling, but I just had this multicam black one laying around. So that is what is on there. One thing we didn't touch on yet before we move back is the front sight. Now, a lot of modern sporting shotguns are coming with fiber optic sights, at least based on what I'm seeing working at a gun store. Some of the cheaper ones will have like a brass bead or something like that. This one has kind of a white bead, which I prefer personally over the brass bead. The brass bead can be nice, but in a lot of weather conditions, especially right now with summer, with dry grass and bushes and trees and everything else, that brass color kind of blends in and provides a lower contrast. The white bead tends to stand out a little bit better, a little bit higher contrast. It's really easy to pick up no matter what the lighting conditions are, and it's just a really quick way for me to get my sights on target. I know there are going to be people who are disappointed that there's no like ghost ring options for these. However, given that all of my experience with shotguns is with a bead style front sight, this is honestly more natural to me. So I just found that I shot this thing really efficiently and effectively right out the gate with the factory included sight. And I really haven't felt the need to upgrade. I may do it at some point, but it'll be not because it needs it, but because I want it. So for what that's worth, we do have a ribbed barrel here for her pleasure. So they do have some knurling on the top here just to reduce the amount of glare potentially coming off it, which is a nice little touch. And then again, it just gives us the standoff above the barrel for the appropriate sight picture. Now, as far as the forend on this thing, there's not a whole lot going on here. You do have some texturing here, almost like an orange peel style texturing on the underside of it, which just helps give you a little bit more positive traction. You do also have a little bit of an indentation above that, so you do have something to wrap your hands around. There's not going to be a great place for me to attach a tape switch for a light on here. I'll probably figure that out once that time comes. And when I do an update on the shotgun, we'll probably go more into that later. If you have any suggestions, if you have one of these shotguns, definitely let me know what you think I should do. Now, moving back to the receiver here, one of the first things you'll notice, again, if you're familiar with these shotguns, is that this is not the factory bolt release anymore. Typically, out of the box, these come with just a small, round bolt release. That's what you'll see me using in all of the shooting footage I'm going to be rolling in this video. And it was, to me, one of the biggest drawbacks to using this gun in a tactical context. It was just a little small and a little bit stiff to be able to get onto consistently and quickly every single time. This I got from, I think it was CZ, like USA. I think I ordered it direct from their website. I'll, again, put it in the top of the screen here, the exact website I got it from. But it's designed for the CZ712. I know there are some aftermarket options that are thread, like you just thread and tap the hole there. This was just a little bit simpler, easier to do, and makes a huge difference in how easy this thing is to reload quickly. I've done a lot of just dry practice with this with snap caps coming out of the side here and off of a chest rig, and it just makes that reloading process a lot easier. It's a lot faster, whether I'm coming over the top reloading and pushing down on this button, like I've typically done to reload this. Also, if I'm feeding to the port from underneath, it's just really easy to hit that button on my way back around. Just a lot more leverage, a lot bigger target to find, just makes that process a lot easier. Some people are going to say you might accidentally bump it, but the reality is, if I'm ever in a position where that button is getting hit, the bolt's already closed, so I'm not worried about this getting accidentally hit anymore once this is closed. Really, that's only an issue when it's open. Now, one thing you'll probably have noticed if you were observant there, in order to get this to lock back, let me just let this go back forward. If I don't pull the trigger, this will not lock open. It'll just cycle back forward. It will also not feed from the magazine. So in order to get it to A, lock open, and B, feed from the magazine, I have a little button here at the back of my loading port. Push that down. You'll see the feed tray drop down, and then I can also lock it open. Also, obviously, if I were to fire this, it will then manually lock, or it will automatically lock open if it's firing, or I can manually lock it back if there's no round in the chamber. Now, pros and cons to this. One, it depends on your manual of arms and how you prefer using your shotgun. For me, I wasn't a fan of it at first. For whatever reason, intuitively, I just assumed that this would handle like some of the other semi-automatic shotguns I've used, where it'll feed from the magazine every time I run the handle on it. However, the nice thing there is a couple things. So regardless of what you're using it for, whether it be home defense or tactical purposes, or for like a 3-gun competition, there may be a situation in which the round in the chamber and the ammo in the magazine is not the appropriate ammo for you to use at that exact moment. So let's say you're doing a competition, you've been running birdshot on your close steel targets, and now I have a target a little bit further away, and I wasn't sure how many rounds I was going to need of that birdshot. If I needed to switch to slugs or buckshot, I can eject the round out of the chamber, leave this thing empty, or I can hold it back, throw the round I actually need in there, close it, and then without having to feed one into the magazine, rack the pump, or run the charging handle in order to get it to have the round I want, I can just manually pick it, throw it in there, load it, and then be ready to fire. The other nice thing is because it feeds this way, it's a lot easier to unload the magazine tube for whatever reason without having to cycle it through the action. I think it's understandable. A lot of people, when they're unloading the gun, are probably in an environment where they don't want to be firing or accidentally firing, or put the firearm in a position where it can malfunction in a way where it will fire. So unloading it, again, without going through the magazine tube or through the action is a good thing. So in that case, what I can do is I can push up on the feed tray, push my bolt release up here, and that will actually kick out around. Let me actually grab a snap cap so I can demonstrate that. All right, so what I'm about to do, don't do at home, but I can't find my snap cap, so I'm going to demonstrate this with a live round. Again, I'm what you call not a professional, but seriously, don't try this. But to show you how much confidence I have in my ability to unload this thing without cycling the action. So my feed tray is loose because this assumes that there is either a round in the chamber or an empty chamber here, but basically the hammer is cocked, so I can I'll load a round in the magazine tube there. I can push up on my feed tray, push in on my bolt release, and that will kick that round back out, again, without needing to go through the action. So it's a much safer way to unload it because we're just not putting it in a position where it can fire. So kind of a nice attribute of that feeding mechanism. Now, because we just loaded from it, I might as well talk about it. This is the way I have been running shotgun ammo on the sides of my shotguns for about 6 years now, really ever since I got out of the military. I've just been running these S-Tac shotgun cards. I tried doing some of the hard polymer ones way back in the day, and I just never had good experiences with them. Made the guns harder to take apart, to clean. It just really limited my usability of those. If they wore out, they were completely unusable. These shotgun guards, this one specifically from S-Tac, I've used some from a couple different brands. S-Tac is my current favorite. Just makes it a lot easier to have ammo on the gun. You've seen these all over the place if you've been watching any shotgun content recently, but that's because they genuinely work. I can have an extra one of these in a pocket or something like that. If this thing runs dry, I can just slap another one on there. Or again, if I'm running this in a competition, if I'm at a stage where I need a bunch of birdshot, but I want some buckshot or slugs as a backup, or if I'm just going to be running only birdshot, I can have a strip of, again, buckshot or slug in my pocket. So I can just tear this off, throw what I need on there for whatever the task at hand is. For me personally, if I am using a shotgun in a home defense context, it's going to be loaded with double-aught buck. Then I'm going to have more double-aught buck here on the side, as well as some slugs in case I need to do something that a slug is going to be well suited for, in which case I can then load that in and use those slugs instead. You'll also be able to tell that I load them opposite. So brass up typically on my buckshot, brass down on the slugs, and that just keeps me from accidentally mixing up which is which, because I don't trust my memory to know where I positioned it. I'd rather just something real quick and obvious to be able to determine how where things are positioned on here. So moving on, we have the safety back here at the back of the trigger guard. This is actually one of my lesser liked things about this shotgun. It's in a kind of awkward position to use quickly and easily. I find myself basically, if I'm awaiting like the timer or something like that, resting my finger basically ready to push on the safety and then drop my hand into the trigger guard. The drawback there is I'm having to completely reestablish my grip every time. I would almost prefer it being on the front of the trigger guard so I can maintain my fire control grip and then drop back into the trigger guard. I'm not really sure what the best solution is here. If any of you have a recommendation of how to make that easier to actuate, please let me know, because it's really my biggest hang up of keeping me from like totally saying this is the best semi-automatic shotgun on the market, regardless of price. So anyway, let me know there. Also, one of my other hangups here, not a huge deal for me because again, I like bead style sights on shotguns, but there's no allowance for optics mounting here on the top. It's not grooved, and there's also no drilling or tapping to be able to install a rail of any sort. So that kind of sucks. You could theoretically have a gunsmith drill and tap this receiver to be able to put a rail on there. I've thought about doing that myself. But again, for my preference of using the bead sight, it hasn't been a huge deal, but it does kind of suck that that is not an option straight out the gate, at least with this model or current models available on the market of the 712. Now back here, in order to mount the Sling in a way that I prefer, I actually went ahead and used one of the Blue Force Gear A2 Sling adapters. So it works just fine. It does have a spot to be able to put in a rear sling swivel stud. So if you wanted to run a more traditional style sling, you can do that. I just preferred the location of this a little bit better for how it positions the sling on my body. Do with that information what you will. These things are like, I think I had to order direct from Blue Force Gear because no one else carries them. It's like 16 bucks, and it just made mounting the sling a lot easier. Obviously, you don't have to run a Blue Force Gear sling on the Blue Force Gear adapter. It just happens that I like Blue Force Gear slings. Now, last but not least, let's go ahead and talk about how this thing actually works. Probably should have mentioned this a little bit earlier. But semi-automatic shotguns have various methods of operation. This is a gas-driven shotgun, not as opposed to like an inertia-driven shotgun, for example, like the CZ 1012s, kind of their newer product line. However, I can say that the gas system on this has been extremely reliable for me. I can only think of one instance where this thing has had a malfunction, again, through about 400 rounds, and that was with some really old double-aught buck that we got as kind of a donation at the gun store. My manager was just kind of shooting random ammo through this thing, and we had one malfunction. He quickly cleared it, so I didn't even have a time to identify what the malfunction was, so I couldn't tell you. I'll roll in the footage obviously so you can see it for yourself, but I can say I have had no other malfunctions through the rest of the shooting with this thing, and I have some of the boxes of ammo to run through here. I shot mostly birdshot, obviously low brass birdshot. And it just so happens most of it is either an ounce of shot or heavier, which is typically what semi-automatic shotguns are going to need. But it's honestly some of this stuff I've had for years and years and years and years. Some of it I got for this test. So I have some old Federal. This is some 1 1/8 number 8 shot, 2 3/4. It's worth mentioning all the ammo I ran through this thing was 2 3/4 because 3-inch is unobtainium right now, at least where I'm at. This is 1 ounce 7.5 shot from looks like also Federal. Yep. This is some of the newer Federal Top Gun. This is an 1 1/8 number 8 shot. I also ran some of the 7 shot from these guys. I have some 1 ounce Winchester Super X 7.5, 2 3/4. And then as far as like the more like defensive ammo, I did some shooting with this S&B 12 pellet double-aught buck. You'll see more on that in a minute here. Some of the Hornady Critical Defense 8 pellet double-aught buck. And then I ran quite a few of these Remington 1 ounce slugs, again 2 3/4-inch 1 ounce slugs through this thing. And again, it ran all of it, with the exception of that one, just kind of random buckshot ammo, just fine, no issues whatsoever. Now, because we are talking about the types of ammo I ran through this, let's go ahead and cut in a little bit of footage where I actually went out and patterned this thing with a couple different types of buckshot, as well as did a little bit of offhand grouping with slugs. So let's go ahead and cut to that footage right meow. All right, so you're gonna have to forgive the noise a little bit because there's some construction going on the bay next door. But I've got a paper target set up at 10 yards, and I'm gonna go through a couple different versions of double-aught buck just to get an idea of the patterning. Now, just for reference, I have the improved cylinder choke in here. That's one I've been using pretty much the whole time because I don't want to have to worry about changing chokes depending on what I'm shooting. I can just shoot whatever I want through the improved cylinder. So first, we're gonna start with just some cheap herders. This is 9 pellet, 2 3/4, double-aught buck. I got this stuff like 10 years ago. I don't know if this is the current herders, but just for an example of some cheaper stuff, we're gonna start with that again at 10 yards, and we're gonna go lower third here. All right, let's see how that did. All right, so again, we're at 10 yards. I was aiming in this general area. So it was point of aim, point of impact. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, possibly 8 and 9. It's hard to tell if this is a double or not. If I had to guess, I would say either there's a second one in this hole or one went through where the hole went through. This is a good that many inches. I'm gonna say like about 8 inches. If I had to take a guess there, I'm gonna go ahead and mark these up just in case we get some overspill from any of our other shots here. So let's go ahead and try some of the S&B 12 pellet double-aught buck. I'm gonna aim it high up here. If we need to, I'll switch targets for the third shot, but we'll see what happens. So next up, we're going to be doing some 12 pellet double-aught buck. This is still 2 3/4-inch. This is from S&B. I've shot this stuff before. Again, at 10 yards, I expect this to take up pretty much a lot of that upper chest that we're going to be aiming at here. But let's just see how this 2 3/4-inch 12 pellet double-aught buck does here at 10 yards. Alright, looks like the shell, or the hole, excuse me, came out and hit you. Actually, we have a tighter pattern than I was expecting, so let's go ahead and see what happened. So here you can see the impact of the 12 pellets. One thing you'll notice, there's no hole from a wad. to the best of my knowledge, this stuff doesn't have a wad. That's part of how they're able to fit 12 pellets in here. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And again, possibly, yeah, there's definitely 2 in that one. We're a little bit tighter. If you don't include this little flyer from down here, below camera here from that first shot, we're looking at a pretty similar spread. This one's probably going to be closer to 7 inches. I'm going to measure all this once I'm in a place where that's going to need to do. Again, at 10 yards, we're getting just under that 1 inch per yard traveled down range. Whereas again, if we include that 1 pellet flyer from below, we're just over probably that, right around that 1 inch per yard travel down range. Now I'm going to go ahead and do the next type of double up buck, and I think we should be able to get it nice and tight in here. All right, so last but not least, we have some critical defense. This is some 8 pellet double up buck. This stuff, in my experience, patterns extremely tight, including through my little SBS. So I have a feeling this will be nice and tight, again, even here at 10 yards. So we're just gonna go for right in between those previous 2 groups, and we should have a very clear, tight 8 pellet group. Man, this stuff kicks significantly harder, again, still being 2 3/4 inch. All right, so you might be able to see this is where the wad hit from that group right up there. I was aiming about here. We're still pretty close for this stuff, and something odd that happened, it strung perfectly out horizontally. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 just below. So glad we marked up the previous ones. So I can actually roll in a picture I took of this stuff through this same shotgun that I did about a month and a half, 2 months ago. I didn't have this horizontal stringing, although that is very fascinating, but nonetheless you can see that this is a much tighter group. That's kind of the reputation of 8 pellet, and especially this Hornady critical duty or critical defense, whatever it is, double up buck. It patterns extremely tight, again, in a perfect little row here with 1 underneath. So that's just an idea. Obviously we're not doing any 3-inch shells. That's mostly because A, I love my shoulder, but B, just because in the times we're in, that ammo is unavailable. So hope that was interesting. All right, so now we're back at 15 yards from the same target. I've got some cheaper 2 3/4 inch Remington Slugger. These are 1 ounce slugs, 2 3/4 inch. I'm just gonna take some shots at the head and see what kind of groups we can get standing offhand. So nothing too scientific here, mostly just the test of my wherewithal as a shooter and my ability to shoot, hopefully, tight groups offhand. But let's see how this goes. All right, let's take a look at that group. All right, so as you can see, that pattern nice and tight. My front sight was right in here. If I can draw it out for you, my front sight was right in there. So again, we're hitting a little bit low. Now, for what it's worth, I don't have a rear sight, so it's hard to guess exactly if I can get exactly the same elevation adjustment every single time. We're just going based off my cheek weld and that front sight post. But we have a nice tight cluster here. Again, only 15 yards. I mean, 3 of these are essentially 1 hole. And this, I think this was actually my 3rd shot, brought the group down. Low left, it's weird. Gun shoots low left, I don't know what that's about. These little nicks here are from just the other stuff coming out with it, but 4 rounds of the 1-inch slugs and a nice tight group at 15 yards. I would say, especially if you find a slug this thing likes better, you can expect point of aim, point of impact accuracy out to some pretty good distances. Now, I know a lot of you are going to be thinking, after seeing some of that footage, of what the grouping might have looked like with different chokes. And from what I understand, again, I'm far from a shotgun expert here, buckshot typically doesn't like to be choked just because of how the pellets interact with each other in flight. But the results that I got on the target are a little bit better than average if, again, we take that 1 inch per yard traveled down range into play. As again, especially that Hornady critical defense or critical duty, whatever it is. That stuff groups phenomenally well, and is definitely a really compelling argument for a home defense buckshot. But again, you can do with the information you saw as you will. And again, I didn't group any of like the birdshot. I just was pumping rounds through this thing, trying to get this thing hot, trying to see if I could get it to fail. To include running 100 rounds through it, pretty much as close as I could get to nonstop, of just, again, some regular birdshot. It was actually that Federal Top Gun, I think it was number 8, 2 3/4. Just trying to run it quickly and again, get this thing hot, see if I could get some parts to start working loose or anything like that. And again, this thing just handled it like a champ. Now, 400 rounds is far from an exhaustive test of this shotgun. But unfortunately, the reality of where we are in 2021, shotgun ammo is surprisingly hard to get a hold of. And when you do find it, it's not always cheap. Now, thankfully, working at a gun store, I have a little bit of a better lead on ammo. But it's still not great. And I will be doing an update on this shotgun once I get a lot more rounds through it. If you would like to see more on that, I would highly encourage you to check out my Patreon, because again, this is a hard thing to pay for all out of my own pocket, which has basically been the case up to now. And if any of you want to send me ammo to run through this thing, will hit me up and we can talk more specifics on that. But again, through the 400 rounds or so that I've run through it, this thing has been great and has given me a lot of confidence in this shotgun. Also, I know a lot of you are gonna, if you've watched this video, have probably seen the TFB TV video that he did on the poverty tier shotgun, basically an answer to his Beretta 1301 video. I watched that video as well. And it seemed like the gun he was shooting, the Black Aces Tactical one, was mostly choking on 3-inch shells. Again, I didn't have a chance to run 3-inch through this. I definitely wanted to after seeing his video. I also tried to do some research because those Black Aces Tactical shotguns look an awful lot like these shotguns. And I had to look at some reference pictures and actually got hands-on one of those shotguns very recently, just in a gun store. I didn't shoot it. All those say is made in Turkey. It doesn't say who in Turkey is making it, whereas again, these are made by Huglu. So I have a lot more confidence in Huglu to make shotguns than just some random Turkish company. Again, assuming that it is different. And again, based on what I saw, the build quality on this thing is a lot better. So I don't know, but hopefully again, that's something I'm gonna be able to test in the near future, again, with this shotgun when it comes time to do an update on this gun. Since we've gone over the entire rifle, let's just do another high-level overview of some of the pros and some of the cons, and then we'll kind of wrap up what my thoughts are on this shotgun in general. So let's start with the cons. So as I already mentioned, I really wish that this thing had some allowance for mounting of an optic rail of some sort, or gave you options other than using your bead sight. I realize that CZ shotguns are heavily geared towards sportsmen, but that should be an option that we are allowed to have. But whatever, we don't have that. My other big thing here is the safety is just a little bit tricky to actuate at speed under the clock. Obviously with time, you'll get more used to that. But I wish there was a better option there. Also, kind of a limited capacity if you're trying to talk about a tactical shotgun. And there is kind of a severe lack of aftermarket availability for parts on these shotguns specifically, hence why I had to do some actual like permanent modifications to the gun to get this +2 extension to work. There are, again, workarounds like having someone fabricate a sleeve for you, but I just love using hacksaws, so I had to do that to get this thing to work. Again, it is what it is. Depending on what you're using these shotguns for, that may or may not matter. Now, getting into the pros. So again, this thing has been exceptionally reliable. And if we're talking about shotguns that I'm using especially for self-defense, or again, even for something like competition use, reliability is a really, really important thing. It's something that makes or breaks a home defense gun. If it doesn't go bang every time you pull the trigger, you have a problem. And again, especially when we're talking shotguns that can be semi-auto shotguns that can be particularly ammo sensitive. Again, all the things that I shot through this thing, it ran great, but I did at least use ounce or heavier birdshot, and then obviously slugs and buckshot, it was going to run fine regardless. I couldn't even find less than ounce weight payloads on birdshot to see if it would run anything lighter, but I figure it probably would just fine, at least at this point with it being worked in. Now, one of the other pros here is the front sight up here. That big white dot is almost like an excess big dot. It really draws your attention, stands out against whatever you're pointing your target at, and just helps get you a nice clear sight picture to get shots on target quickly. But probably the biggest pro, in my opinion, is cost. Now, I alluded to cost a little bit at the very beginning of the video, but as I said, these things are around 500 bucks. And even with all the modifications I've done, including the bolt release, including the extension, including this Nordic clamp, including the sling and everything else, and the shotgun card, these are like $7. I'm under $600 on this shotgun. And for a reliable semi-automatic shotgun from a reputable brand like CZ, who stands behind their products, there's really not much more I can ask for. Now, once I throw a light and the pick rail and everything on here, that's going to jump the price up quite a bit. But for a base shotgun that works really well, gives me 7+1, at, again, under 600 bucks as configured, this is just a really, really tough gun to beat. And honestly, it makes me wonder why these aren't more popular. And I think it's just a matter of lack of exposure to these. Like I said, when I was looking into purchasing one of these myself, I looked up reviews, and there wasn't much. What was there was either very old and on a different model, or I hate to say it, not a really great video that went into any sense of depth on how the gun actually ran. So I really think that these are kind of a hidden gem out there that people aren't aware of, and like they're readily in stock. Like again, working at a gun store, I'm able to check through a lot of distributors and see what they have in stock. CZ 712s, even direct from CZ, are in stock pretty much all the time, ready to ship. So they're out there waiting to be had if people actually recognize that they exist. So I think that's just a really, really cool thing. Now, as far as just kind of my overall thoughts, again, I think shotguns are kind of dumb. There's very few practical applications for shotguns these days outside of certain hunting applications that I don't think could be better done with a rifle of some sort. Like, and as evidence of this, my only other shotguns, I have a side-by-side, a real old beat up cheap side-by-side that I cut down to just over 18 inches just because, you know, I'm a fan of Fallout and I needed a cool gun. And then my other shotgun is a Form 1 SBS Mossberg 590 Shockwave, because I figure if I'm actually practically using a shotgun, having something nice and short and easy to use would be a good thing. But I'd always kind of wanted to delve into the semi-auto shotguns just for my own sake of experience and exposure to these. And I'm really happy that this is the one that I picked out. So it took someone who thought shotguns were dumb and made me have a lot of fun with semi-automatic shotguns, and I foresee me buying a lot more 12 gauge in the coming months and years just to run through this thing. So if you have any experience with these CZ shotguns, let me know. I'd be really interested to hear how the 1012s do. Again, the inertia version of the CZ shotgun line. They don't currently make a tactical model like this one, but maybe that's something coming in the future. With the 712s, again, they do make a bunch of different versions of it. Again, this is the 712 utility. They have a bunch of the hunting-oriented ones as well. They also used to make kind of a 3-gun version that already had a magazine tube and everything installed. The only issue was like there were some issues with the fitment of those and apparently some other little things. But again, at least in the utility model like this one, things have been working really, really well. But again, if you have experience, definitely throw that in the comment section below, because this is a sample of one. Again, I paid for this myself, ran all my own ammo through it. Bought it through the store where I work. So again, do with that information what you will, but it is a sample of one, so definitely check the comments and see if other people have had a similar experience to mine. If you're looking for just a really fun semi-automatic shotgun, I really think you should take a look at this, unless you want to spend significantly more on something like a Benelli M4 or M2 or a Beretta 1301. Again, there's been a lot of love for shotguns in the gun tubes recently between TFB TV and Grand Thumb just posting his video on the M4. So hopefully with that renewed interest, people will start checking these things out, because again, I think it's attention that is well deserved on these shotguns. If you have any general questions, comments, or concerns, definitely let me know down in the comment section down below. If you already haven't angrily typed away about me having a live round in the magazine tube on this, you know, hey, again, it's your comments. You can say whatever you want for the most part. But anyway, with all that being said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching.